Cool. So welcome to our workshop tonight on time management. Tonight we have a very special guest, Iris Nevins. Hey, Iris. Um, and what's interesting about Iris is that she was one of the first members, not of Career Karma, but of Breaking into Startups. And for those of you who joined earlier, Breaking into Startups is the podcast that Ruben Archer and I started to feature stories not of founders, because media already puts a lot of emphasis on founders. But our goal was to feature stories of people who came from non-traditional backgrounds, veterans, parents, formerly incarcerated, who work in tech. And there's a lot of them who work in tech who didn't get a traditional computer science degree, and they broke in. And so Iris, when she was working as a teacher, she started listening to the podcast around the same time as we released it, and she was figuring out how she was going to career transition. And that was back in 2015, I think. And today, Iris is going to share with you what she does and how she got here. But she's seen us kind of grow that community to thousands of people. And now she's not just a member of Career Karma, but she also helped us launch our publication. So if you go to Career Karma /blog and you see all those articles being written. She was one of the first editors who also helped us launch the publication. And I asked Iris to come and speak tonight because Iris is someone who knows what it's like to be in your shoes. She had to find a way to work and find time to study before she got into a boot camp. She also had to manage her time while in the boot camp and now as a software engineer at Mailchimp. And last year, before she left East Bay to move to Atlanta, she did a really cool workshop on time management. And I asked her to come back and speak to all of you because that's one of the biggest factors that I hear people tell me that's holding them back from pursuing this career transition. So with that said, I want to say hi and welcome Iris. Hey, Iris.
Hey, sorry.
Hey,
I was
hey,
looking for
welcome.
a folder. Hi,
Yeah.
y'all.
Hey, and this is you've done a few of these AMAs with our community, so people can look at some of the past ones um, on YouTube. But what's interesting about you is you've been through this journey. I think for this workshop, maybe you can share a little bit about yourself and your story for 10 minutes, and then we can just jump into the time management workshop right after.
Yeah, that sounds good. Actually, I found the PowerPoint that I used for the first workshop, so I
Yeah.
think I'm just gonna reuse it. I crossed a few things out because life has happened, and since then I've realized that some things actually didn't work for me. So I'll talk about that too. But yeah, I'll go into this more in the when I pull up the presentation. But long story short, I was a teacher and community organizer, and realized that I had a passion for, or developed a passion for technology, wanted to learn how to build applications, reached out to a few friends for advice, and one of them added me to the Breaking into Startups group on Facebook. And so from then I started seeing the podcast episodes, started listening to the podcast episodes, and it was just a sequence of events that happened from there. Listening to the episodes helped me get an idea of like what I needed to do to get from point A to point B. And so I just took all that information and I came up with a plan, and it was like a 1-year plan that I wrote down. I gave myself like a few months to study, a few months to go to boot camp, and a few months to job hunt. And I ended up getting a job, and now I work in tech. So that's kind of like the general summary. But yeah, let me pull this.
Iris, before we jump into the presentation, I know your road was pretty rocky, and I think this road is rocky for everyone. And can you just share some of the examples of like how difficult sometimes, like how difficult times could get, and what you did to keep yourself going, and how you problem solved and got yourself out of those situations.
Yeah. So I think so the biggest problem in the beginning was finding time. I was a teacher, and then I was also running an organization on the side. And so and I was like getting super into fitness and health. So I was trying to make sure that I went to the gym at least 5 or 6 days a week. And so I was extremely busy. My days started at like 5:30 in the morning and didn't end usually until 8:30, 9:30 at night. And so it was really hard to find time to fit studying in. So that was the biggest challenge in the beginning. And then once I applied to a boot camp, once I started applying to boot camps, I got conditionally accepted to Hackbright, and then eventually they rejected me, and it was very unexpected because it had felt like from the assignments that they had given me, they had felt really easy. And so I was like, oh, of course I'm going to get into this school. Like, these assignments are so easy. And I didn't get in, and I was like super disappointed, didn't know what to do. I'd already bought my plane ticket to California. I'd already found a place to live. So that's one example. And then another example is that when I had finished my program, I started running out of money. Didn't really, know how I was going to continue paying my rent and things like that. And so I think the general strategy was to just, first of all, know that there's always a solution. And I think to just know that you have to just be constantly thinking of like, how can you solve this problem? Like, how can you get out of this? Who can you talk to? What resources can you find? What can you look up online? You have to get rid of your ego and be willing to ask for help and let people know that you're in a difficult situation. And oftentimes that is what brought support to me, was being open and honest about that. And yeah, I think reaching out for help and just deciding that you're not going to give up is really important.
Yeah, Iris, and I feel like I've been with you through this journey, like since the very beginning. Like, I've been with so many of you who are now part of Career Karma, and I think one thing that stood out to me about you is that you actually took our advice, and you like didn't like kind of go the other way, because sometimes things might feel counterintuitive. And we tell people, I think one good example is we always say, like, most jobs are found through referral, not by applying online. Just reach out to people, build connections. And I know for a fact, when you were doing your boot camp, you were reaching out to the VP of engineering at Reddit. You did an article about him that helped you get an interview, and then you turned it into an offer. And you actually like took advice, and you reached out to us if you needed help. And there's nothing wrong with that. This goes out to everyone listening. If there is something you need help with, you're not an island, and our whole community is built to help you change your career. So reach out to us and reach out to your squads, and just trust your struggle.
Yes, I agree with that. And one more thing on the topic of networking, which I didn't mention this in the interview that we did, the podcast interview, but networking is like super important. And what's going to happen is like, you're going to reach out to people. A lot of people are not going to respond, or they're going to say they're willing to meet with you and then they'll forget or something like that. Or you'll meet with people and you'll have good conversation and you'll learn a lot about them, but they won't offer any sort of like assistance. They're not going to say, hey, if a job comes up, I'll recommend, refer you. So I would say out of the maybe like 40 meetings that I had or something like that, there was probably less than 10 people who were like very enthusiastic about helping me and giving me referrals and things like that. But so the two companies that I got offers from, both of those companies I had referrals to. One of them is the Reddit one, and then the other one is Mailchimp. And what happened is that I actually cold contacted Mailchimp and got in touch with the recruiter. And the recruiter was like, we're not hiring junior engineers right now, but let me speak to our senior director and see if they'd be open to it. And then what happened is that I had messaged a director of engineering at Lyft like months prior. And I had went to Lyft and I spoke to her and she was like, we don't have any positions at Lyft for you, but you seem really awesome and I'll keep an eye out for you. And then when I was interviewing with when I applied to Mailchimp, she had checked in with me and I told her that I applied to Mailchimp, and she knew the senior director of engineering at Mailchimp, and she contacted him and told him, hey, here's this girl who's like really awesome. You should totally take her seriously. So it was like this weird string of things that had happened, but like you really don't know what's going to happen. And it may feel like you're going on all these meetings and nothing may come of it, but you never know. You have to just do it. Just follow the process. Just trust our advice. Just do it.
Yeah. And I know Iris really goes in on her episode with us, and she covers everything she pretty much lays out the formula that she followed herself. And I shared the YouTube video in the chat, so a lot of you can watch it after. I would love to Iris, it's already been, I think, almost 2 years since you became an engineer. I would love for you to share like what it's like being an engineer. Do you still enjoy this type of work? And I know you're not in East Bay anymore and you moved to Atlanta. So can you also share like what were the reasons for why you moved to Atlanta, and how can our Atlanta community stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so I really enjoy being an engineer. I think the work itself is challenging. It's interesting. I love the lifestyle. I love the benefits. I love the freedom and like the flexibility that I have in my schedule. There's a lot of perks that comes with working in this industry that you don't get in other industries. If I want to leave in the middle of the day to go home or go to the post office or pick my kid up from school, I mean, I don't have a kid, but if I had to, I could very easily do that. And I don't have to ask permission. I don't have to ask my manager, hey, can I go pick up I just say, I'm going to leave for an hour and I'll finish up the day at home. Or I'm going to leave early today and I'll be in early tomorrow. Like, there's just a lot of freedom that I have, which is really important to me, and helps create like a very healthy work-life balance. I would say that those things, to be honest, those things and the money matter way more than the actual day-to-day job of being an engineer. If those things didn't exist, I don't know if I would enjoy the actual day-to-day work of being an engineer as much as I do. And I think that's really important. This is not my greatest, like, deepest passion. This is not the sole thing that I think I want to do forever and ever. And I don't think that's the case for a lot of people who are engineers. It's something that is enjoyable, it's doable, it's meaningful, but more than that, the lifestyle that I have, makes it worth it. And I don't think that I'll be an engineer forever. I definitely want to go into management and leadership eventually.
Yeah.
In terms of moving to Atlanta, what happened is that even though I was, making good money and so forth, I felt like the Bay was just too expensive, and you have to be making a lot of money in order to live very, very comfortably. And I like to live comfortably, I don't know. I don't enjoy living in like a tiny little apartment where I'm paying hella money to live there. And so I felt like I wasn't able to save as much as I had really wanted to. And it was going to take a lot of time for me to get to a point where I could save the way that I wanted to. And I had wanted to do things like Airbnb, but then there's certain rules about, like, if you have a landlord, some landlords don't allow you to do Airbnb. And so I was like, man, I need to have my own place. I need to own my own place where I can make my own rules and I can have roommates or Airbnb and make additional income, because my main job is not going to be enough for me to create the kind of wealth that I really want in the long term. And so I decided that I wanted to move to Atlanta and buy a house. And so that's what I did. And yeah, so I'm here in my house. that I'm obsessed with. I love it.
And this is really amazing because I think for a lot of people on this call, I think coding, solving, building things at school, but we also need to take care of like our needs as human beings, and we want to take care of our families. We want to have financial freedom to like save so you can go on trips, you can take care of your kids. And I'm super happy to see how much you sacrificed to be where you are today. And now that you're here, you're just not stopping. You just keep going. And I know you and I had a conversation recently. You're thinking about your next thing and your next thing. And I'm just so happy that you're part of our community, Iris. I think you're muted, Iris.
Oh, whoops. I was saying thank you.
Yeah. Before we jump into the workshop, anyone have 1 or 2 questions for Iris?
I actually do have questions, but they're referring to the topic, so I could hold them to the end.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe let's jump into the topic, and then we'll leave 10 minutes at the end for questions. Okay?
Okay, cool.
Let's do that.
Let me just create a doc for questions, because I am going to ask you guys what are some of the things are that you want to make sure that I cover at some point in the presentation. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so keep in mind, I did this presentation like a year ago or over a year ago. And at the time, my life was very different. My goals were very different. So I removed some things and I changed some things around. But this is the general agenda. I'll talk about my story. I'm going to ask you guys some questions just to understand exactly what you want to cover. And then I'll talk about goal setting, scheduling, and attitude, and then we'll have questions at the end. So just a bit about me. I talked about being a teacher, talked about being an activist. It took me 1 year from start to finish to transition to tech from the time that I made my my goal. It actually took me, I think, a year and like 3 or 4 weeks before I got my first offer. My job hunt was 10 weeks till I got my offer. So 10 weeks from the time that I graduated till the time that I got my first offer. And I'm a software engineer at Mailchimp. I founded a company called Organize, which we're actually turning into a nonprofit. We're in the process of doing that. I am a puppy mom. I used to be in a serious long-term relationship, and I put that in because that is a really big factor in terms of how much time you have available to you, because it's important to prioritize that. I am no longer in a relationship, so that does free up how much time I have to focus on these other things. I did start a business about 3 or 4 months ago, so I added that to my plate. I go to CrossFit 5 days a week, and I should say on here that I'm a double business owner because I also I Airbnb one. I have a roommate. I Airbnb 1 bedroom in my house, and I'm about to start Airbnb a 2nd bedroom. So I have to manage all of that as well, which does take time. And here's my puppy, Star. She's a year and 5 months now. Timur met her. Did you meet her?
Yeah, I think she spilled wine on your couch when.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so he met her when she was about half that size.
Baby, yeah.
Okay, so the first thing for me that's always super important, and I think matters even more than actual time management, is goal setting. Okay, and I do this. I don't necessarily schedule a time anymore to set goals. I just do it kind of periodically when I feel the need to, or I feel the motivation to. And so I will admit that I'm not as like structured as I think I used to be, or I used to try to be, because I've realized that it just doesn't work. Like I don't really sustain it as much as I would like to. So, but I still set goals. And so, actually, before I get into the goal setting, what are some of the things that you guys want to make sure that I cover today?
Hey, hey Iris, my name is Elle. And one thing I would love to hear about is when you reached out to the VP, like what was the phrasing, I guess, as best as you can of your messaging to them, that elicited a response from them.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, my name is Sydney. I want to know, like, how do you handle rejections?
Okay. Anyone
Hello.
else?
How you doing, Iris? This is Greg Joy. How
Hi.
you doing?
I'm good.
So, I just wanted to know from your perspective as a developer now, how did you you kind of did a light overview of how you made the transition, but as far as time management, handling, you worked, you was in school, and then you had a side thing going on. How did you in micromanaging? How did you micromanage?
You're cutting out. I heard, how did you micromanage?
I think he's asking, how do you balance, like you're in school, you might have your side hustle, you might have family, like how do you decide what to prioritize?
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
Overall question, how do you estimate the time of thing that you haven't done is actually going to take?
Okay. Anybody else?
Yep. I would like to ask how much time you allotted to coding as you were transitioning, like outside of what was required to your boot camp. So like during prep or side projects, that type of stuff.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I would like to know how was your first day when you first started your job as a coder? Like the first job you had. How was that? And also, what made you choose the company you with amongst the offers that you had? Also.
Yes, that's a great way of putting it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Okay, yes. Hi, I know I'm driving. I just wanted to also know, like, what was your portfolio looking like on your GitHub? When you started applying, like, how many extra products did you have in addition to what you had for school?
Okay.
And for networking, not just messaging, but can you focus a bit on like the best ways to network? Was it through LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, like just the best like platforms, I guess, to use?
And what did you say when you were reaching out? I mean, it's pretty much like what she just said, but what were you saying when you were reaching out to those people?
Okay.
Can I also just say, if you guys are driving, please be careful and don't hold your phones. Just like a public announcement.
Okay, so I wrote all these questions down. Some of them are related to time management, some of them are not. So I'll focus on the time management questions, and then we'll cover all the other ones at the end if we have time. Cool? Okay. Can you guys see the presentation still?
Yep.
So the first step of time management for me is goal setting. Always, always, always. And I set goals periodically. I don't know if you guys can, let me stop sharing so I can show you my goal setting folder. Stop share. New share. Okay, y'all can see my whole screen, right? Okay, so I have this goal setting folder, and here I have like goals that I had set in 2017. and I had done this whole worksheet thing. And this was the year that I was applying to boot camps and prepping and stuff like that, and then going through the course. And so I did a pretty good job of tracking things for a few months, and then I fell off, which is usually what happens, just to be completely honest. I'll get like this bout of motivation and inspiration. I'll set up a spreadsheet or something like that, and then I'll do really great at tracking. And then after a while, I start to fall off and I stop filling things out. And what I realized is that that's totally okay, because for the time that I did it, it was very useful and it was very helpful. Those were a lot more simple goals. Like those were like weekly planning and stuff like that. Here I have some of my like long-term goals, like life goals, like how much money I want to save. Here I actually purchased my first home in 10 years. And I guess I did that.
10 times sooner.
I don't know. I don't remember when I wrote this. Last edit was July 22nd, 2018. I think at the time in July, I don't think I had thought that I was going to buy a home yet. So some of these things I know it's possible I will never get to. Some of these things I have gotten to. I have at least one real estate investment. I am almost going to earn $200,000 a year or more. Once you add in my Airbnb, the money that I get from Airbnb and rent, that's almost $2,000 a month in additional income. And then for the business that I just started, once that takes off, that will start to add in additional income as well. I've started going to CrossFit. The rest of this I have not even gotten close to. And oftentimes I forget, like I actually wrote these things down and I completely forgot that I even wrote that I want to become a salsa dancer. So every now and then I revisit these things and I like update them or take stuff out because life changes, things change. But obviously the ones that are the most top of mind are the ones that I am focusing on and I'm accomplishing. So setting goals is like really important for making sure that you have an idea of like where you want to go and what you want to accomplish. I have money goals as well. I don't even know how long ago I wrote this down, but I decided that once I become rich, I want to spend my money in a certain way. So I like calculate all these calculations and whatnot. So I used to say that it's important to be like super specific and to follow all of these like SMART goal guidelines, which is what we teach like students in school, like as teachers. And I would say that that's important, but even if your goals aren't perfectly SMART goals, that's totally okay, because I do that all the time. Can you all see the presentation? Okay.
Yeah.
So when it comes to SMART goals, you want to make sure that they're specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So here's some examples of strong SMART goals and versus weak SMART goals. So get a job is a very weak goal. In fact, it's not a SMART goal at all because there's no timeline. You're not saying what type of job it is. You're not saying like where you want it to be or how much money you're making. There's no details whatsoever. And when you give yourself something as vague as that, the chances of you accomplishing exactly what you really want to accomplish are a lot lower. Okay. When you add more specifics, it helps you better plan and prepare for what you need to do. Okay. So become a software engineer is a lot more specific. Get a job in 2 weeks. That's a week goal. Get a job in the Bay Area tech industry by January 2019. That's a lot more specific. You know that it's in the Bay Area. You know that it's in the tech industry. You know exactly what date you want to get it by. The previous one that said 2 weeks was not attainable. Okay. Most people can't get a job in 2 weeks. Okay. So you also want to be very realistic when you're setting your goals. I'm going to skip the rest of this because we don't have a lot of time. But does that make sense to everybody? So if you haven't sat down and written out exactly what you're trying to accomplish, like, yes, you want to get a job in tech. Yes, you want to become a software engineer, but where do you want to be? What type of job do you want to have? What type of company do you want to be at? What type of salary do you want to earn? You know, those are very important things. When I was coming into it, I decided I wanted to make $100,000 a year, minimum. I had a friend who told me, you probably should aim for 70 or 80K. You know, that's more realistic. And I was like, no, I set my goal at exactly what it was. And I think that helped to give me the push to work as hard as I did and to strategize as hard as I did. Because if I knew that getting a job that paid $100,000 or more was going to be harder than getting a job that paid 70 or 80 grand. So my plan had that in mind. When it comes to short-term goal setting, usually what has worked for me is setting goals for the week. So on a Sunday or Monday or something like that, I might sit down and write out like everything that I want to accomplish for the week, and I break it down into activities, and then I put those activities in my schedule. Okay. Scheduling is like super important. I cannot operate without a schedule. Like I literally cannot function. If something is not in my schedule, it does not exist to me. I check my schedule usually the first thing in the morning when I wake up, and I check it throughout the day just so that I can remember or just so I can make sure that I'm not missing something, because I have so many things to do and I can't hold all of that information in my head. It's impossible. So it's really important that I have a schedule. I will say that what I do differently now than before is that I don't sit down on a Sunday or Monday and like write all the things out that I need to do. I just write them down as I go. So when the thought comes to me, like, oh, I need to mail something to somebody, or I need to go to the bank and do XYZ, or I need to order checks, or I need to check in with this person, or I need to schedule this meeting. I just, at the time when it comes to me, I write it down, or I put it in my schedule somehow. I have my Google Calendar on my phone. So I'm a lot less like regimented than I used to be, because I've realized that now I think that doing that was important for a period of time. And I think now I'm sufficient enough that I don't have to be like super regimented. If you have terrible time management, then it might be good for you to start out being like super regimented until you get into the habit of things. And then you can be a bit more flexible. Does that make sense? Cool. Yeah, so I don't do this weekly activity thing anymore, but I do add stuff to my schedule as they come up. Here's an example of my schedule. This is from a while back. So a lot of this is like work stuff and meetings and things like that. But I put the things that I'm doing outside of work as well. This schedule is like an example of a kind of general schedule. This one is a bit more specific. Okay, so some of the differences you'll notice is that here I have tickets, and then here I have tickets. Whereas in this more specific schedule, I have the exact ticket here and the exact ticket here. Okay, so that when the time comes, I don't waste 15 or 20 minutes figuring out what I'm gonna do, right? I know the moment that I sit down to do it, exactly what I'm gonna do. And I usually will put links or something like that, or some sort of information in the Google Calendar event, so that as soon as I'm ready to do the thing, I can just get started right away instead of having to figure all this other stuff out. Down here, you'll see for the PHP course, I have this specific course, right, that I would be doing, as opposed to just in this vague schedule, just self-study, right? That's not very specific. And you'll also see here on the side that I have like things that I do outside of work. So on Saturday, like speech writing, research. I don't even remember why I was doing that. Let's look at my current calendar. So a lot of this is work stuff. I used to actually fill my work schedule a lot more than I do now. I used to try and out structure every single part of the day. But what I realized is that a lot of the times things don't go the way that you wanted to or don't go the way that you planned. So I needed to leave some flexibility in there. Also, oftentimes coworkers will try and schedule time with you. And if they go to your schedule and it's completely full, then it looks like you're not available. So I don't fill it up as much as I used to. But you'll see here that like I needed to go to the DMV. So I put that in my schedule right here. I had a phone call with somebody who wanted to talk about getting into tech and becoming a software engineer. So that's in my schedule right here. They actually canceled. So I was able to, so I was planning to, speak with them this morning. And then at the time I realized that they had actually canceled the event. I have our meeting tonight, right? Yesterday I had a meeting for my business. The day before I also had a meeting for my business. On Sundays, I have to go pick up food for my dog, right? So I put these things in my schedule to make sure that I get notifications to remind me that I need to do these things. And if anything happens and I have to switch things around, I can just move it. I can just say, oh, I can't pick up Star's food on Sunday. I'm just going to move it to Monday, right? And I'll get a notification an hour before just to make sure I remember to go pick up her food. Are there any people who like don't use scheduling at all? Like it's just something that you just haven't been able to fit into your life?
Yeah, I want to do some scheduling. Like it's just I don't know how to go about it.
Anybody else?
I've started my scheduling, but I haven't completely finished it yet.
Yeah, same here.
I'm trying to get used to that, to scheduling and getting to follow, like when when the reminder come up, actually follow up with the reminder stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I started scheduling, but I can't stop filling up my calendar, so everything is like spam.
Yeah, so you get notifications and you just don't even pay attention anymore. Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, one thing I've learned is to be very strategic with when I get notifications, and to make sure that for certain things, I don't necessarily put a notification at all. Especially if it's something that I know I'm going to do every day, like CrossFit, I don't put a notification for that. And so being very specific about how you set up your events, your calendar events, is very helpful. I will admit that it has taken me years to get to this point of using my calendar so regularly and so efficiently. It's not something that you learn how to do overnight. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of messing up and like not using your calendar and then using your calendar and then not using it. But I think after a while you start to realize that the calendar is so beneficial to you that you start to like really appreciate it. Like I love my calendar. I don't know what I would do without it. And my business partner actually isn't great at using calendars. And I can tell. I can totally tell. You can tell when somebody just does not use a calendar because usually they forget about things. They don't show up for things. Like it totally changes how reliable you are and how much people can feel like they can count on you and trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, But yeah, it does take time. And over time, my calendar has gotten more complicated. Now I put all of my bills in here. So I don't miss any payments, I even, the other day, I added all of my closest friends' birthdays in here. So, that's in here now as well. So whenever, because I decided I want to send my friends gifts or like flowers or things like that when it's their birthday. So now I get those notifications. So slowly my calendar has gotten more and more complex. Any questions about the calendar?
I mean, I don't have any questions, but I just want to say that by listening to you, I feel that calendar is something that takes some months or maybe a year to get together. And I was using, as a banker, I use calendar like daily. And if I don't use my calendar, I am gonna miss my meetings with my clients. And I honestly, I can say I can't go a day without calendar as well. But it took me at least a year and a half to understand what calendar is and get my things together. And I'm still adding new things every day. I still feel like I have to add some new things every day.
Yeah. It's constantly a process, constantly developing. I started this birthday thing maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I sent my first friend ever some flowers, and she was so happy. And I was so thankful I put her birthday in my calendar, because I almost forgot until I got that notification like 4 days before. But yeah, so it's super helpful. And also another thing that's really important is whenever you're meeting with somebody, so especially when you're doing your networking, like let's say you email somebody, they respond to you, you decide to meet up, you should immediately be like, I'm going to send you a Google Calendar event, and make sure you send it to them, not just for you so that you remember, but also so that they remember, because you don't know how organized they are. And I can't tell you how many people I know I've heard, like I've recommended that someone from my job, like meet with someone who's interested in tech or something like that. And the person, my coworker, just like completely forgot about it. And it's probably because they didn't set up like an event, like they didn't set up a reminder. So that is super important. Whenever you're meeting with someone now, any sort of meeting that I'm having, I always send somebody an event. Or if someone asks to meet with me, I tell them to send me an event. They don't, and I tell them, if you don't send me an event, I can't guarantee that I'll be there.
Yeah, and I think what Iris is mentioning, like it's like these basic skills that help you live your life on your own agenda. It's super critical, because throughout life, your friends are gonna be like, your friends could say, "Hey, let's hang out," and it's hard for you to say no, because you don't know what the trade-offs are. If you know that during that time you're gonna be at the gym and your friends want to hang out, then it's, what you're giving up, right? And you're not relying on kind of that last minute, like maybe I'll go hang out with a friend. You set up your calendar ahead of time, and then you commit to it, and then you know exactly what you need to do next. And in the context where all of you are now, right? You guys are all applying for schools and coding schools. One of the things they look for is not necessarily how technical you are when you schedule the non-technical interviews, the behavioral interviews. One of the things they look for is that you take it seriously and you show up, right? And the reason they take it seriously is at some point you're going to be in the job search, and you're going to have phone screens, you're going to have interviews, you're going to have on-sites, and the way you treat your interviews for schools is how you're going to treat those interviews for the jobs. That's why it's so good that Iris is mentioning this, because it's just like one of those basic life skills everyone needs to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And also another point I think that I kind of touched on is that, like, I used to be someone who wasn't the most reliable. Whereas like if I said I was going to be somewhere, that didn't necessarily mean I would show up. Or if I said I was going to do something, I didn't always do it. And I think at a certain point, I just got really tired of people having like low expectations, and I think it feels really good where I am now in life, that people take me very seriously, and they know that I am like on top of my shit. I'm not perfect. Yeah, I will miss a meeting every now and then, you never know. Things happen, but I think generally people see me as a very like productive, effective person. And I think that goes a long way, not just in terms of your career, but whether or not people are willing to work with you. This business that I started, I had to get an investor. And I know that a part of the reason why the investor felt like they could give me their money was because they knew what type of person I was, and that it's a risk no matter what, but that based on my actions, that they could trust that I would probably be like effective, right? Or I would more than likely be reliable. So, you know, time management changes the way that people see you. And when people see you differently, people are willing to give you opportunities, and they're willing to open doors for you, and they're willing to invite you to work with them because they know that they can trust you. So
hey, Iris, just want to say we have about 10, 15 minutes left for the time management workshop. I know there's some people in the chat who are asking about like, do you believe that there is time for all of it, or for it all? And how do you prioritize things that should be on your calendar? Because you can easily start putting things, but how do you decide what goes on your calendar?
I can't see the chat. I would say it's a matter of trial and error. You know, like I used to fill my calendar with like dance classes. Like all these evenings would be filled with dance classes. And after a few weeks, I realized I wasn't going to any of them. You know, like I didn't have the time or the energy in the evenings. I used to think, oh, I'll just go to CrossFit and go to dance class. No, it doesn't. It just doesn't work. So I removed all of those from my calendar, and I just have these 2 dance classes on Saturday. And also, just because something is in your calendar doesn't mean that you are automatically going to go. Like I don't always go to dance class, but I put it in there just so that I have a reminder of when these classes are. But for me, they're totally optional. These are completely not mandatory. Whereas like CrossFit is not optional. CrossFit is like, I have to go. If I don't go, I, you know, have failed at one of my like very important goals. And so you can tell yourself like which things are just there as something you can do if you find the time, and which things are there as like mandatory or like super important things. And you can color code them. That's why I have all these different colors to help guide you. I'm down to stay past 9 o'clock if folks want to stay longer. I didn't really have much more in my PowerPoint, and then I'll go over the questions that you guys asked, and I'll try and go through them as quickly as possible. So another thing that's super important is attitude. And I think this makes a really, really big difference. So staying positive is really important. Every time you mess up, every time you fail, every time you miss a meeting, every time you don't do something you said you were going to do, every single time that happens, you have to stay positive, and you have to tell yourself that you're just going to keep trying. Like at the point where you tell yourself where you're not going to keep trying is the point where you have like, you've just completely, you're not giving yourself any opportunity to be successful. I don't care if you fail 1,000 times. Okay. Stay positive. And people say that staying positive is cliche, but it's really important. And over time, what happens is that like maybe in the beginning you take 1 step forward, 3 steps back, right? Or 4 steps back. Some people just like to sabotage themselves in their lives. I used to be one of those people. And after a while, you'll start to notice that you're taking 3 steps forward and 1 step forward and 3 steps back. And then eventually it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And then eventually you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step, you know, like it's a very slow process of getting to a point where you're failing less and less and less often. But you just have to know that no matter how many times you fail, you're just going to keep trying. Okay. It's also super important to visualize how you want to be or how you want to live your life. I fantasize all the time about being this like hyper productive person. I am obsessed with Beyonce, and I follow all sorts of Beyonce fan pages on Instagram. And one of the reasons that I love her is because she is clearly very good at all of these things. You know, like she's very good at being like, I want to accomplish this specific thing, and I'm going to work as hard as I have to and be as disciplined as I need to be to accomplish it. And she's far beyond me in terms of her ability to just be highly productive and highly effective. And I literally fantasize about being like her in that way. not being like Beyonce, a performer, but about being that way and like having this life where I'm just like accomplishing all these things that I want to accomplish. And I think that that helps to keep me focused. Does that make sense? I can't see the chat, but I know you guys are saying stuff.
Yeah, I think Stacey said she loves Beyonce.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people agreeing with you.
So another thing is you're going to have to make sacrifices. And I think that that's something that that stops a lot of people because they realize that something is hard and then they give up. Okay. And so the sacrifice part is really important. You might have to sacrifice sleep, right? It might mean that, okay, you had set the goal that you were going to finish this tutorial by Thursday night and it's Wednesday night and you have procrastinated and now you have 20 hours left of, or let's say 10 hours left of this tutorial and you only have 24 hours to do it. What does that mean? You might have to stay up all night and get very little sleep for 2 or 3 nights. You just have to make that sacrifice. Just suck it up and do it. Beyonce does it, so you can do it too. Like literally, it's just 2 or 3 nights, you know? And that's what I have to tell myself. It's a sacrifice for like a short period of time, but you suck it up and you do it. Maybe you're not going to be able to go out with your friends to something that's happening. I remember when I was going through my process, I had to give up weed. I was like a pretty big pot smoker and I knew that if I continued smoking, I was not going to be able to stick to the schedule that I had set for myself. So I gave up weed for the entire period of time that I was preparing to go to boot camp and also for the majority of time that I was in boot camp as well. Okay. So making sacrifices is super important. I tried this like reward incentive system. And I included it in my previous presentation where I would like track if I accomplished something and then give myself points. And then depending on how many points I got, I would like reward myself in some way. And that completely didn't work. So I took it out. And the last thing, again, like never stop trying, like keep going, keep trying. Every time you fail, just start again, literally. All right. I will get into the questions. Let's see, what were the questions you guys had?
Iris, and feel free to, if you stop sharing your screen, then you can also, I think you'll be able to see all the questions. And we can just have people unmute themselves and ask questions as well.
Okay. I had written down all the questions that people had.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay. That's cool. Yeah, that's smart.
Okay. So the first thing was, how did I handle the transition? So while I was working and managing my organization, how did I manage my time? So all of these strategies is what I was using. I had a calendar. I had set goals. I had told my friends what the situation was. I told my friends, usually I would hang out with I had a group of friends and we were all pot smokers and we would meet up sometimes a few nights a week to like smoke weed and hang out. And I told them, look, for the next few months, you're not going to see me. And don't try and pressure me to hang out with you. Like, please don't like try and like peer pressure me. This is really important to me. And it's important that you understand what I'm trying to do. And so, and they were very supportive. Sometimes I would just show up really quickly just to say hi or just to, you know, show face. And they would never offer it to me or anything like that. And so they did a really good job of like helping me stay on track. But I will say that I had a lot of nights where I didn't get much sleep. I had a lot of days when I went into work and I was exhausted. I had a lot of weekends where, because I didn't get to do as much studying in the week as I wanted to, I had to study for the whole Saturday or the whole Sunday. I didn't have much time to spend with family or friends or even my boyfriend. There were moments where he was just like, I feel like we were living in the same house, like he was staying with me at my parents' house, but he would be there and I would just be doing other things. And so it was definitely like a sacrifice on all levels. But again, it was for a short period of time. You know, it's not forever. During the job hunt, what I did was when I graduated from my boot camp, I gave myself a schedule. I said that I would work. So during the boot camp, I decided that I would always stay. I would get to school on time. I wasn't going to get there like super early or anything, but I would always stay until 10 p.m. at night. So the boot camp was 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I said, I'm not going to leave until 10 p.m. And so every day I would stay after, and I would do additional studying, or I would work on a side project or something like that. And so I'm the way that these boot camps are set up is that they give you a lot of work that can't really fit into the actual like regular schedule. So you have to find time outside of work outside of the boot camp schedule to study these things and like make sure that you fully understand the concepts. And because I did that, because I took that time, I really excelled in all of our exams and all of our tests. People considered me one of the top students, and a lot of that had to do with spending that extra time to make sure that I understood the concepts. Some people get things very easily, like right away. Some people, it takes them repeatedly going over the concept a few times to get it. And if you are that type of person, you cannot leave boot camp at 6 p.m. Like, you just can't. It's not an option. I know that I'm smart, but I'm not the smartest. There were people in my program who could leave at 6, study for like an hour at home, and they could come home and like ace the test. There's one girl specifically who could do that. The only person in the class who was like comparable to me in terms of performance. And in order for me to perform at the level that she performed at, I had to work like 3 times as hard. Does that make sense? So during the boot camp, I basically gave myself really long days. And then during the job hunt, I said, okay, I'm not going to work 12, 13 hours a day anymore. I'm going to give myself a proper schedule and work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So every morning I would get up and I would go to the library and I would study there. And I had given myself like a list of like topics that I needed to cover. So there's all these different data structures that you have to be familiar with in preparation for your technical interviews. You also want to be familiar with like architecture problems. Your boot camp will let you know like the different topics you need to be familiar with. And so I basically gave myself a schedule and said that I would spend a certain amount of time on each topic every day. And I also had a project. This goes to the question of like, how many projects did you have outside of my school? So when I graduated from my boot camp, So first of all, I went into my boot camp with a project in mind. And I would say that is like super helpful. I had something that I knew that I wanted to build. I was really passionate about it. It was related to social justice. And so as I was going through the course, every time we would learn something, I would use it to like I would like spend some of my free time like adding to this project. And there were actually times where I would get to a point where I needed to do something in the project that we hadn't learned in class yet, and one of the mentors would teach me. So sometimes I was a little bit ahead of the other students because I had this project kind of like guiding me. And then by the time we had to do our final like independent project, I actually had this whole thing that I had already spent all this time working on. And so I ended up having one of the more complex projects out of all my classmates because I had spent the past like 3 months working on it. So going in with the project, I think is like super helpful. And then when I graduated from boot camp, I spent a week building another project. And that one was, of course, a lot more complicated. I had learned a lot more at that time. It was my first time building like an actual fully functioning app from start to finish on my own. And that was the project that I primarily spoke about whenever I did my job interviews. And so it's super important that when you graduate, I think you spend some of your time building something on your own. Because it definitely adds to when they ask you questions. If you can say more than just I built this thing during my program, I think it adds a lot of credibility. So during the job hunt, I had already done a lot of networking, so I didn't do as much networking during the job hunt. I said, I was like, okay, I'll do maybe like one meeting a week or something like that. Whereas before I was doing sometimes one meeting a day. And then I just had a regular 9 to 5 schedule for studying, and I let myself relax in the evenings and stuff like that. But I studied very hard, and I didn't start interviewing until I had 1 month of studying under my belt. I had applied to jobs, but I didn't do, like, even Mailchimp. I told them I didn't want to actually do my first technical interview until I was ready. And so they gave me that time to prepare. How do you estimate how much time something will take? Honestly, you just have to guess. You just have to guess and then trial and error and figure it out. How much time did you allot to coding during prep time? I had initially set out thinking that I would do like an hour a day or something like that. That did not work. So I ended up doing maybe 2 or 3 hours a week on the weekend for like the first few months. And then by the time it was like a month out it was like a month before it was time for me to apply to boot camps, I realized that I had not studied nearly as much as I had needed to. So during that last month, I like really, really hammered down, and I gave up all my weekends. Like I would study like a full day on a Saturday, a full day on a Sunday. I had spring break as a teacher, and I studied every single day on my spring break. I didn't hang out with any of my friends. So I definitely made like a really strong, strong push during that last month. If you can spread it out more, it's definitely, I think, better. Okay, those are all the time management questions. Any other time management questions before I move on to the non-time management questions?
What do you think about time trackers and bullet journals?
What's a time tracker?
Well, I guess that answers that question. A time tracker is basically when you start a task, you start a timer, and when you end the task, you stop the timer and you log it.
Oh, that's I've never done that before. I have tried to work in like intervals. So I'll say like I'll work or I'll study for 2 hours and then I'll take a break, and then study for 2 hours, take a break or something like that. But I've never actually tracked how much time I worked using a tracker. I will say that during that time, I was using like a activity sheet or whatever, and I did put like I wanted to study 2 hours a week or something like that, and I would check off if I did that, but I didn't actually like sit down and like use a time tracker in that exact way. Okay. But at the end of the day, it's important to do what works for you. You know, like figure out what you think is appealing to you, try it, and if you like it, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, then try and think of something else.
The other question is what do you think about bullet journals?
I'm guessing it's just like where you write down your your goals or the things you need to accomplish.
Yeah, it's a whole system of keeping track of things, but it's offline. So maybe that wouldn't work for you.
Yeah, I'm not the best at writing things down on paper because I lose it. So usually if I'm tracking like things that I need to get done, like I use Trello a lot, and I don't check Trello like every single day. I do for my business, but I don't for like my personal life. But I will on anytime I sit down to actually do work, like I will go into Trello and I will look at what the things are that I put in there, because sometimes I put stuff that I need to do and I completely forget about it. And then a week later, I'm like, oh shit, I actually was supposed to do this thing. So I think at the end of the day, it's definitely important to write down somewhere the things you need to do, whether it's on paper, in a Google Doc, in Trello, in Asana, in your reminder app or something like that on your computer. At the end of the day, definitely track things for sure.
All right.
Anyone else have a time management question? Okay, cool. So, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, this is a quick one. How would you go about like breaking tasks into like more manageable, I guess, list items for a schedule? Like, say you had like this whole large list of tasks, but you wanted to break it down into something more manageable.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, well, first of all, if you have a large list of tasks and you try and break it all down into smaller things, you're just going to make your list a lot larger. Which might, for some people, might stress you out. I think so for me, what I usually do is like in Trello, I might have like a general thing that I need to accomplish. And then I'll write in the notes some of the like smaller details or some of the more specific things. Just to like make sure that I understand all the things that I need to do to accomplish just one thing. If it's something that's really complex, then you definitely need to break it down into multiple smaller tasks. You just have to make sure that you're not going to be overwhelmed by that. It's all about what you prefer. Some people don't like seeing a list of 50 things that they need to do. It's just not good for them. So they need to make the list shorter. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm definitely one of those people.
Yeah, because like for one of the prep work that I'm working on, for instance, I know like individual lessons that make up a certain section,
Mm-hmm.
and it can seem daunting looking at that entire list. So I was trying to figure out how to go about like making them more manageable.
Mm-hmm. I would say, I don't know, let's say you have like a course and it has like 10 sections, right? You don't necessarily have to put in let's say you use Trello. You don't necessarily have to put each of the 10 sections in Trello. You could just get through 3 sections. And then you get through those 3 sections and then you say, okay, I want to get through another 2 sections. And you create another Trello ticket for that. I don't know, you don't have to be like super granular.
I would also add that as you're creating the stuff, I think what Iris said on her schedule, where like CrossFit is this like thing that doesn't change, you gotta have clearly, like you gotta know for yourself, what is that thing that you have to do that given day? Because the problem with creating a list of things to do in a day is if you make 10 things, you might not get to the last thing on the list, which could be the most important thing for that given day. Right? So what you got to ask yourself too is like, if I went to bed today and I only got 2 of those things done out of the whole list, like what are the things that I need to be doing? And then force yourself to do it, because otherwise you tend to procrastinate. People leave things until the end and they just do things in sequential order versus getting the most important things done first. And then whatever happens in the rest of the day, like it happens, but at least you know for yourself you got that most important thing done. For me, one example was when I was in the job search after a coding boot camp, I would wake up at 6 a.m. and I would send out 5 emails to people who worked in tech, and I would do that before I even would check my cell phone and my phone. And it was just like one of those things where it was hard in the beginning, but then I knew that if I kept sending out emails, then I would be meeting more people, and meeting more people would lead to more interviews. And I just told myself that if I wanted to be successful, that's the thing I was going to have to do. And then for the rest of the day, I would work on my projects. I might apply on some job boards. I might reach out to some folks later in the day, but I knew that one thing that I had to do daily, and I did it before everything else. So
I think also if you're having a hard time estimating how much time it takes to complete a task, so let's say you have your course to go through, you know, and it might be, you know, if you say, I want to finish like 3 sections by the end of the week, but maybe the 3rd section is like a really long section, you know, those are the types of things that might be like difficult to like predict how long it will take. So I think the most important thing is to just have a set amount of time that you spend on it. Okay. So say, you know, every day or on Tuesday and Thursday, I'm going to spend 2 hours on this course. And whatever I get through in those 2 hours, I get through in those 2 hours, you know? And if 2 or 3 weeks go by and you realize that you're not even halfway to your goal, like let's say you're halfway through, let's say you set the goal to finish the course in a month and 2 weeks go by and you're not even halfway through the course, then maybe you want to increase it to 3 hours a week or 4 hours, you know, 4 hours every Tuesday or Thursday or something like that. You have to just do a lot of reflecting and self-assessing and questioning, is this system that I'm creating? Because you're basically creating a system to manage your life. That's essentially what it is. And so you constantly have to say, is this system effective? Is it helping me meet my goals? Does it work with my personality or my needs? Or is there something that I'm being really stubborn about? You know, like it's a constant process of self-assessment. No one can give you like the exact formula or the exact answer for something like this.
Hey Iris, I know you said you could stay a little longer. I think that's great. In case someone had to drop off now, what's the best way to stay in touch with you? I want to make sure that people have a way to connect with you in case someone has to drop off. I know it's getting late on the East Coast, and then we can finish up the workshop and answer more questions.
Yeah, I would say if you have like a specific question or you want to meet with me or something like that, my email address is ideal. It's ikn02010@gmail. And Timur, feel free to share my address with folks or post it somewhere. So that's my personal address. Some people reach out to me on LinkedIn. I honestly don't really check LinkedIn very often. And sometimes I just ignore people. I'm at a point now where I'm just like, LinkedIn is just not a priority anymore. I used to make sure that I responded to people right away. Now sometimes it might take me up to a month to respond on LinkedIn. So yeah, I'll write it down. So email is the best way if you want to get a quick response. Keep in mind, I may not always respond like right away. It may take me a few days. It may even take me a week or two, but I generally do not miss emails. Like even if it takes 2 weeks, I always go through my email and I go back just to make sure I haven't missed anything. So if it does take 2 weeks, it was on accident, I promise.
Also, can I also add that with reaching out to Iris, I know you and I talk, Iris, and sometimes you're like, yeah, people reach out to me, but sometimes people tend to ask questions that are like very like they're easily answered online. And if you reach out to Iris, don't ask her things like what is coding, right? Be very specific about the questions and what you want Iris to help you with. That is specifically like you're reaching out to her because she's an expert in that area, or you know that she would be a good person to get advice from. And if you reach out to Iris and she doesn't respond to you, just follow up. I think having been on both sides of the table, I think persistence is key. And if she doesn't respond to your first email, follow up again and keep emailing her, because Iris, you saw her schedule, right? She's busy. She wants to help everyone, but make it also easier for her to remember and keep you top of mind. And Iris lives in Atlanta, so if you live in Atlanta, reach out to her, be respectful of her time, and also always think about how do you add value to the person you're reaching out to. right? So think about ways you can also add value to them, because if you can do that, then everyone wins, and that's how you build strong relationships.
Yeah, I will say, I second everything Timur said. If I don't respond after a few days, definitely feel free to follow up. I may have missed it. You can schedule meetings with me via my website. I will say though, it is definitely I've had a lot of people schedule meetings with me and not show up. So please make sure you show up or cancel like way ahead of time. And also, yes, do your research, listen to my podcast, read the articles on my website. Some people reach out to me and they're like, so what was your job hunt like? And I'm just like, oh my God, there's so many places on my website where I talk about my job hunt. Like, it would take a lot longer for me to sit on the phone and explain to you my job hunt than it would take for you to just sit down and read all of those things. So definitely take the time to do your research.
What's your I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
What's your podcast? You mentioned you had one, so how can we find that?
So my podcast is, you can find it on my website, my company's website is organize.co, and it's called The Organized Podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts or Google Play, or on my website. And yeah, we interview activists, basically.
Nice, thank you.
Mm-hmm. There are all these non-time management questions. Let's say I'll answer 3. Okay, so I'm looking at this list. The first one was, how was my first day on the job as a coder? I'm sorry, I do not remember. I have no idea. What made me choose Mailchimp? I chose Mailchimp because I was very impressed by the people during my interview process. The recruiter, the senior director, all of the people who interviewed me, they just really, really impressed me. They seemed like really good people who were very thoughtful and very intentional. And I'll give an example. So when I went and I did my interview in Atlanta, it snowed. It was like the one day in the year that it snowed. And I had come in flip-flops. And when the senior director, who's back in Oakland, found out, he emailed me and was like, Iris, I'm so sorry that this happened. Like, we did not know this was going to happen. Just in case this has inconvenienced you in some way or you need something, I'm going to send you some gift cards. And he sent me a gift card for like $200 and another gift card for like $300 or something like that. And it actually ended up being great because I needed to go and buy boots, like, because I didn't have the proper shoes. And he didn't ask, and he was like, if you don't need anything, then just keep the money and spend it on whatever you want. But that to me was like very impressive. I was like, wow, he actually thought, like, what am I going through having to deal with this snow experience, and how can he help me or make my experience easier? And there were just multiple things like that that had happened that made me very impressed. They also gave me a higher offer, but I think that even if Mailchimp's offer was lower than Reddit's, I think I still would have gone with Mailchimp. Did I have any coding experience? You mean like job experience? I don't know who asked that. Maxat?
Yes, Iris. I mean, did you have any education or experience coding before you went into real project?
The only experience I had was the boot camp and the prep that I did for the boot camp.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Handling rejection is hard. You just gotta keep looking forward and just know that it's a part of the process. Literally, everyone goes through it. There's nobody who doesn't get rejected. When I reached out to the VP of engineering, what happened was I had written an article on him for Breaking Into Startups. I had reached out to Breaking Into Startups and told them, is there a way that I can help you guys? This, like Timur said, it's great if you can find a way to add value. So I said, how you guys have helped me out so much, how can I help you? And they were like, well, if you want, you can write articles for us. And so I wrote an article on the interview that they did with the VP of engineering at Reddit at that time. His name is Nick Caldwell. And once the article was published, he, you know, the article was like floating around the internet, and everywhere it was floating around, he would comment and say, thanks, Iris, this is like a really great article, blah, 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 blah. And that had happened a few times. And initially I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to like let Timur do an introduction. But after the third time that he commented, I was like, you know what, I should just message him directly. So I messaged him and was like, I would love to meet you in person. And he was like, yeah, you're more than welcome to come to the office. And it just went from there. I talked about my portfolio, definitely do projects outside of the boot camp, definitely work on things that you're passionate about, definitely have an idea of the types of projects that you're interested in. If you don't, it's going to be a lot harder for you to work on these projects. It made a big difference for me to be passionate about the things that I was creating or to have a genuine interest. Best ways to network: LinkedIn, email, reaching out to people from the Breaking Into Startups podcast, and reaching out, like LinkedIn especially, just message people who are managers or directors at companies. When I would message like engineers, I didn't get as many responses as when I messaged managers. Also, I think that it's a lot easier to find a job outside of the Bay than it is to find a job in the Bay. I'm just gonna say that. So, you know, the Bay is just too saturated right now. And then what did I say when I was reaching out to people? So in the beginning, I would just say, I'm transitioning into tech, and I just want to know. If I was reaching out to someone who was also a transitioner, I would say, I just want to know about your story and how it went for you. And during the meeting, I would just ask about their experiences and their process. The Bay refers to Oakland, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, that whole area. So when I would reach out to people who were non-traditional, I would ask them about their journey and like what their process was like, which helped also give me like these tidbits of like advice, these little nuggets of advice that were super helpful. In a whole conversation, I might only get one nugget. In some conversations, I got 5 nuggets. You never know. When I was reaching out to someone who worked in tech but was like not a transitioner or something like that, I would ask about their experience at their company. What do they like about their company? What do they do? There are all different types of engineers. You have platform engineers, you have security engineers, you have, you know, all these different things. And so I asked a lot of questions about their actual day-to-day job. I asked questions about their salaries. I asked questions about their job funk, like their managers, what they liked about their companies, their work-life balance. I was literally just gathering information. And that's what you're doing. You're gathering information, and in the process, you're hoping that the people you talk to will like you. And then when it was closer to the time for me to actually apply to jobs, I became a lot more specific or a lot more direct. And I would say, like, if I reached out to a manager, I would say that I was interested in positions at that company, and I wanted to know if they had any, if they could connect me to a recruiter, or I don't even remember fully what I said, but something like that. Also, if you start doing these messages early out, you get a lot of practice, and you can see what types of messages people respond to and what types of messages people don't respond to. Timur, why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because as we're having this time management AMA, we actually have our first live meetup for Career Karma at our headquarters.
Oh, so you're running late.
No, so I'm looking at a few people on here, and I know Greg is on here, who's part of FFT Squad, and I just said hi to Melanie and Elise. And you guys can see we have people behind me.
Nice.
Yeah, so we're just bringing our community together in the Bay Area. Yeah.
All right. I answered all the questions.
Yeah, Iris, thank you so much. You definitely went above and beyond. I think this is definitely not the end of Iris coming back to us. Um, Iris has done AMAs on finding jobs, like the job search. We have a podcast episode with her. She has blog posts about her journey on her own website. And so if you enjoyed this, I would say tweet at Iris, tell her what you like, what other questions you have. Um, Continue just going. Don't give up. Have a positive attitude about this. It's going to be tough on this journey, but as long as you keep going and you don't quit, you're going to be just as successful as Iris. And always ask for help. Uh, let's let's give Iris a round of applause, everyone, for such an amazing. Yeah, all 38 of you.
Let's go, Iris!
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time, Iris.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, Iris. Thank you. I know how important time is to you, and we always love when you give that time back to our community.
It is my pleasure. I love doing it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone who is tuned in still. Check out Iris's stuff. Reach out to me if you have questions. Keep going. And I'm going to have all of you doing workshops in 6 to 12 months once you all are on the inside too. So get ready for that.
I'm up for it.
All right, Caleb, Jordan, Sherelle, James, Lauren, Iris, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a great night.
Bye.
Thank you.